When Piers Morgan was forced off the air last month, we were told it was because he had insulted the fake Duchess from Los Angeles. But on some level, it wasn't really about her or even about him. It was about all of us and our right to say what we think is true in a supposedly free country. It was about free speech and the freedom of conscience. He, of course, is still editor-at-large at Daily Mail, and what he writes is still worth reading. But he's not on television right now. And again, that has implications for the freedom of speech around the world. Here's part of our conversation.
What I found was over 5 years, we trebled the ratings on Good Morning Britain. The last day, ironically, was, as you said, the first day we beat the BBC ever. And we had trebled our ratings. So you would have thought people might be thanking me. Instead, I was basically corralled into a position where I was told you've either got to apologise for effectively disbelieving Meghan Markle's version of events here, or your position is untenable and you have to leave. And my gut was, I was going to be damned if I was going to apologise for something that I believe. And I just wasn't going to go down that road. I've seen too many people, when they're bullied by the woke brigade, into apologising. We saw it with Sharon Osbourne. She was bullied into apologising for defending me against a disgusting slur that I'm a racist. And rather than the person who was accusing her apologising to me, Cheryl Underwood, for accusing me falsely of being a racist, Sharon had to apologise for her passionate defence of me, and then she lost her job anyway. We saw recently the editor of Teen Vogue. Before she could even start, she apologised for years about stuff she tweeted as a 17-year-old kid. But that wasn't enough. So apologies don't ever get you anywhere. I don't believe Meghan Markle. Now, what I didn't know, and what was a fascinating thing to discover after I left, was that Meghan Markle, between the Monday and Tuesday, had made a personal complaint to the boss of ITV, Dame Carolyn McCall. I didn't know that. I was never told that. I don't know what pressure she was directly putting on, but she did, I know, personally contact her. I also know she had personally contacted, along with Prince Harry, Ofcom, which is a government regulatory body designed to regulate what we put out on news shows. So I was under attack from Miss Markle, both directly to my boss and to the government regulatory body, under attack to basically conform to her version of events. And I had to believe her. And if I didn't, I was a callous racist and I should be condemned and ultimately, as it turned out later that day, lose my job. And I think that's a pretty perilous slope. A journalist's job, which is to express skepticism about some of the more outlandish claims, like the secret wedding, like the story about Archie becoming a prince and so on. Even down to small stuff, like she'd never had any interest in the royals, when there are pictures of her draped over Buckingham Palace railings when she was a teenager, and so on. I should be able to be a journalist and question the veracity of those statements. And frankly, I should be allowed, in a democracy that values freedom of speech, I should be allowed to say, I'm sorry, I don't believe you. But I wasn't. I wasn't allowed to do that. It was Meghan's way and Meghan's narrative and Meghan's truth. That phrase was actually used by Oprah Winfrey. This is your truth. What does that mean? When do we get to your truth? This is the kind of defence that was the kind of thing we would hear liberals attack Donald Trump for reinventing facts, for creating his own truth. But when Meghan Markle does it, the same liberals that attack Donald Trump cheer and applaud and say, this is her truth and it must be believed. And if you don't believe it, you're a racist. Well, I'm sorry, I'm not a racist. I just don't believe her.
And no one points out the kind of underlying irony is that here you have two of the most powerful people in the world, in Oprah Winfrey and Meghan Markle, both claiming to be victims. They're oppressed. They have more power than you. They got you fired, but you're oppressing them. The strong pretending to be weak in order to crush people below them. Does anyone notice this dynamic?
Well, it's completely absurd, frankly, and I've written about this regularly for the Daily Mail, about the ludicrous hypocrisy of this couple who, by the way, contrary to what many Americans have been led to believe, the press coverage of these two right up to the wedding was completely over-the-top euphoric. Everyone in Britain was thrilled. that finally we were having a non-white bride in the royal family. It hadn't happened. We were all very happy about this. I wrote about how wonderful it was on the wedding day. So this narrative that from the start she was bombarded with horrible, hateful, racist press coverage is another disingenuous load of nonsense, fueled by the Oprah Winfrey Show, where they flashed up a series of headlines. But really where this leaves us is that you've got this concept that somehow Meghan Markle, who married into one of the richest, most privileged families in the world, and within a couple of years has gone back to her home in California, is living in an $11 million mansion, is doing all sorts of enormous deals with Netflix, Spotify, you name it. They're taking the checks, hundreds of millions we read. And how are they getting those, Tucker? They're getting them because they're the Duke and Duchess of Sussex. They're getting them off their royal titles. The royal titles bestowed on them by the very institution that in the interview with Oprah Winfrey, they say they can't stand and is suffocating and traps them and so on and so on. Well, you can't have it both ways. If you really believe that way about the royal family and the monarchy, give up your titles, but they won't do that because it makes them too much money. So now you have these two oppressed people living in a mansion in California, earning hundreds of millions of dollars, in the middle of a pandemic that's killed nearly 3 million people, portraying themselves as the biggest victims in the world. But there are many people who don't have our platform, who are getting wiped out, eradicated, lives destroyed, careers ended, over the most ridiculous things. And it's got to stop, and it will only stop when the mass body of people who don't feel this way, who don't find themselves offended by absolutely everything, when they stand up and go, enough, I'm not going to let this happen. The power of free speech, as Winston Churchill said, some people think free speech is absolutely fine, right to the point they hear an opinion that they don't like, and then it's an outrage. That's not what free speech is. Free speech is about listening to an outrageous opinion you don't agree with and being able to accept that somebody else doesn't feel like you. That's what free speech is.
Suffering does amazing things to people. They become very different in a short period of time. In the case of Piers Morgan, he's gotten a lot wiser and a lot braver and very much worth listening to. We spoke to him for over an hour today. It's available on demand at foxnation.com if you want to watch.